Hell, we're back. All right, so the daily updates are just not feasible at this point. So, fortunately, we didn't have court today, so I'm going to take today to get caught up. But we're probably just going to have to start doing a couple, 3 times a week summary of what's going on because this trial is supposed to go into November and just no. I apologize if I sound like shit, if I'm a little groggy, my nose is red and everything. I kind of feel like I'm trying to get a cold or a sinus infection or something. It's hurt right here like all day. So we'll see. Anyway, we're pretty behind. I work. I have a full-time job. I actually work 2 jobs. I work as a hairstylist and then I work at my family's business as well. And we are just busy. Work is busy. Everybody's working their ass off because everything is so expensive right now and nobody can afford anything. And we're all just working as much as we can. If that's not you, I'm happy for you, proud of you, can't relate because we're riding the struggle bus up over here. So we have covered the George Wagner the Fourth trial up through last Wednesday. So I don't know what day we're on. I'll have to go back and look at my other videos to see. I think it's 17. I think. So we finished up the testimony of Tabitha Breach Wagner Clater. Clater is her last name now. Also, if that's Tabby's account that followed me the other day, girl, let's be friends. Message me, bitch. I love you. Let's be friends. Reach out, bitch. I mean, I'm a good friend. I'm a huge bitch, but I'm a good friend. All right. So this was from last Thursday. We started out hearing from BCI agent Brian White. He has been on the witness stand already and he was back. Brian White was testifying about the search warrant that was served in May of 2017. This was, I believe, while the Wagners were in Alaska. Yes, they were in Alaska at this point. So this is after Tabby, and this is May of 2017. I said that already. They lived in Alaska for a year and they did serve search warrants for, I think, 2 of their properties. So let's get into that and then we will go from there. Okay, so we are on to the week 4 summary, part 2. Okay, I was wrong earlier. We are not on last Thursday. We're on last Wednesday, which was my birthday. So this day was actually a pretty good one. This was BCI agent John Jenkins. I don't remember if he's testified before or not. I'm not sure. So John Jenkins took the stand to talk about a conversation that he had with a fellow agents had attempted to contact him but hadn't had any luck. And he was on their radar because of tips that were called in. Billy Wagner is, of course, the father of Jake and George and the grandfather of Sophia. The agent said it took more time than normal to sift through the relationships in the Roden family because there were so many victims and it was a large family. And when you have that many victims, I mean, think about how many people you know, how many people you're related to, and that would just be if something happened to one person. This happened to 8, so they had to go through all 8 of them, and a lot of them overlapped. Now this clip was an hour and 45 minutes long, and this clip could not be listened to on anything other than normal speed, if not less, on YouTube. Now, I'm not saying that Billy was on meth, but if you've ever talked to a meth head who was all methy at the time, this is what they sound like. I mean, just all over the place. Can't get a word in edgewise. Loud. It doesn't make a lot of sense. Says he doesn't know anything, doesn't have much to say, but then talks for 2 hours, that kind of thing. And at one point, his mood switches like that to from ha ha, like, and his laugh is just something about his laugh is just so off putting to me. But he went from laughing to basically threatening these officers that if what he said in this interview got out, he would know who said it and they'd regret it. He talked about all kinds of stuff about the area, the pill mills, how much he hates dope heads, how much he hates all this other stuff. He also talked several times about his relationship with Chris Sr. and Chris's family. He called Hannah Mae Roden a brat. And he called Chris Sr. his best friend. Head over to part 3. So part 3. I could honestly go on for like a month of all the stuff that we learned in Billy's interview. So I'm just going to touch on like what I think is relevant right now, and then we can always come back to it if we need to. The whole thing is on YouTube. I mean, it's worth a listen because he drops a lot of names, talks about a lot of stuff. It actually, if you're interested in this case, it's worth the listen. I don't remember what day this was, but it's at the very beginning of the video. Billy told the agents that Chris Roden Sr. rarely drank, that he was a good dad, that he took care of his family. But he said that he seemed depressed in the weeks leading up to the funeral, up to the murders. And that one night he had got real drunk and was running up and down the damn road, quote unquote. And then he said that he'd been real depressed and not acting himself, but didn't want to talk about it. He said Chris never talked about anything. Chris kept his business to himself. But he also said that Chris had told more than one person that, quote unquote, the storm is coming. So the agents had received a tip that Billy and Chris Sr. had had a big argument about a week before the murders. And some of the tipsters apparently reported that they saw Billy pull a gun on Chris Sr. Billy denied that that was true and said that if he had pulled a gun on Chris, Chris would have shot him. Now, he started this interview by saying he didn't want to give them a whole lot of information because he didn't trust local law enforcement or the Pike County Sheriff's Office. And that, quote unquote, this is the crookedest fucking county in the state of Ohio. Being from Scioto County, don't think I agree. Look that up. So for someone who didn't really want to talk about it, he proceeded to rattle off every name of everyone that he had ever met and then some, even going so far as to giving directions to people's houses that he didn't actually know, but he knew that Chris knew them. Billy also said the famous, quote unquote, that ain't a bunch of fucking hillbillies do something like that. You'll never convince me. That's some SEAL Team 6 bullshit. He also said that the rumor that a Roden family member did it was bullshit. And he keeps coming back to the rumor that Chris Sr. owed drug money. He was referencing a fire that Chris Sr. had where it burned up drugs, but that's the first I'm hearing of that. I'm not saying that's not true. It's just the first I heard of it. And then we got into the interesting shit. Billy said that he hated Latham. Now, Latham is a town in Western Pike County, but he was not referring to the town. He was referring to a man. And whose nickname is Latham? Skid Montgomery. Go to part 4. Week 4 summary, part 4. Detective, investigator, whatever he is, John Jenkins, he clarified that Latham was a nickname given to Skid Montgomery. Now, you'd have to scroll back a little bit, but I did a little video about Skid Montgomery and what it's like living next to his tenants. Billy went on, dropped a whole bunch of names, but basically, he was talking about how much he hates Skid Montgomery, said he runs this large-scale marijuana operation in addition to his rentals and dope and trafficking and all these things. Billy named a lot of people that work for Skid as possible culprits, and then he said that the Mexican cartel wasn't involved. Now, this interview was done about 6 months after the murders, and towards the beginning, there were a lot of people that believed that this was like a Mexican drug hit, and if it was, they would have killed the kids too. So I never believed that. Billy also said, quote, "Let me tell you something. I ain't no fucking snitch." Seemed a little counterproductive to point that out while you're sitting in an unmarked BCI car telling them everything you know, but whatever. Billy went on about the surviving children being in foster care and how unfair that was. Notes that Jake thought Hannah's newborn was his, but it wasn't. We've long since established that. I mean, there was honestly a lot, but really we didn't learn anything new. George's name really only got mentioned a handful of times. After the audio recording played, John Parker asked the judge to declare a mistrial because the interview wasn't relative to the trial of George. Of course, that was denied. But instructed the jury to view it as an explanation for how the investigation into the murders was conducted, not as any kind of fact obtained in the interview. So at this point, they took a lunch break. And when we came back from lunch, we had Julia Eveslage. She was on this before. She is back. She is the criminal intelligence agent with BCI. She's the one that went over the phone records. BCI did subpoena Facebook to get records of messages sent and received by members of the Roden family. John Parker, of course, objected to these because, of course, he did. Some of them were stricken from the record, though. And because they were stricken from the record, they were not able to show them. They were only able to read them. She read them aloud. She specifically went over messages between Hannah Mae and Tabitha, and Hannah Mae and Tabitha's mother, Patricia. Head on over to the next part. We will get into those. Week 4 summary, part 5. So Julia started out with reading the text messages or the Facebook messages between Tabitha and Hannah Mae Roden. These are the same text messages or Facebook messages that Tabitha read out loud in court a couple days prior. She then read the messages between Hannah Mae and Tabitha's mother, Patricia. Patricia encouraged Hannah Mae not to believe anything that the Wagner says, to be wary of custody agreements, and she said that she had tried to warn her daughter, but she hadn't listened, and Tabitha had ended up losing custody of her son. Hannah Mae replied with the now infamous last words to Patricia. "I won't sign papers ever. It won't happen. They will have to kill me first." Those messages were sent December 9th, 2015, just 4 months before she was murdered. In Billy's interview with BCI, he said that he had 2 phones because he had smashed his previous one. I'm sorry, I'm trying to get a fortune cookie open with one hand and it's just not working. Fortune cookie with no fortune at that. In the famous words of Carrie Bradshaw, I didn't need a cookie to tell me that. We are broke as shit up in here. Anyway, Billy had said that he had to get a new phone because he smashed his old one because he kept trying to call Chris Sr. Well, the investigator, Julia here, that looked through his phone, found no evidence of that. They didn't show any calls to Chris Sr. after approximately 11 p.m. on the night of, and both of those were under 10 seconds. Next to the stand was Ryan Scheiderer. He has testified already. He is the lead investigator on this case. He testified that the Wagners were not initially persons of interest until after reading the Facebook messages from Hannah Mae that directly contradicted information Jake had given them during an interview. Jake had told them that him and Hannah Mae got along. There hadn't been any issues with custody and that sort of thing. And we now know that to be the exact opposite. He also said that friends and family provided information that contradicted what Jake said. Ryan Scheider told them that friends of the Roden family told agents that Chris Sr. had been keeping $20,000 of Billy's money in the safe at his house. And Scheider said $27,000 in cash was found inside that safe. And that information had not been released publicly. Scheider also pointed out in her message about the custody to Patricia that they would have to kill her, not he or just Jake. Hannah had concerns about the whole damn family. Head over to the next part, 6. Week 4, summary part 6, I think. I already forgot. So, just before the 1 year anniversary of the murders in April of 2017, BCI agents visited the Wagner home on Peterson Road and found out that they were moving like a week later to go to Alaska, that the house had sold. They only spoke with Jake, and they spoke with him down around like a fire pit area down around their house. So on May 3rd, the BCI agents came back, and Angela, George, and Jake were loading their belongings in trailers and trucks. These, I guess, were belongings that they were going to store, and probably some of them were going to go to Alaska with them. So while speaking with Angela and Jake, Ryan Scheiderer said that he casually observed numerous fired cartridge casings lying about the driveway all over the place. He said there were hundreds, if not thousands, of shell casings laying all over the yard and the driveway. Now, he did identify the caliber, I don't know, maybe not caliber, but he did at least identify the types of these. This agent is a firearms instructor and basically a firearms expert. So he was able to recognize them even without getting down to look at them closely. My dog is acting insane right now. I'm so sorry. So Scheiderer was able to speak with Angela and Jake that day, but he noted that George quietly went inside the house after he arrived. And then phone records later said that George had sent his father a text message that said, "Don't come down till I text you, got company." Because, you know, when you're not involved in a murder and you're not like your family and you don't care because they've done wrong and all you want to do is do right, you're going to help them hide from the fucking people trying to come solve the murder. Definitely not involved. Scheiderer also brought up that the message was sent to 2 phone numbers, both of which belonging to Billy Wagner. One was replied okay, and the other one did not reply. It was later revealed that Billy Wagner was against the move to Alaska because he didn't want to leave his sick and ailing father, but he basically went along because the rest of the family wanted to go and that Angela wanted to go. And that also fits right in with what Angela says is what happens. Now, Jake would not turn over his cell phone willingly, but they did get a warrant, I think, to download the phone before they left for Alaska. And he did tell them that he was going to have to switch carriers from Verizon to AT&T to have service in Alaska, and they were worried that the phone would be lost. And this dumbass, he had a note on his iPhone of every single gun that every single member in this family owned. Calibers, colors, everything. Head over to part 7. Week 4, part 7. So on May 10th, the day that the new owners were supposed to take control of the Peterson Road property, BCI agents executed a search warrant. They did, of course, collect the shell casings that were in the yard and driveway for ballistics analysis. Inside the home, there was a shelf mounted just inside the front door. Investigators found an unfired .22 caliber cartridge, Remington brand, similar to casings and bullets found inside Frankie and Hannah Hazel's home and in Dana's home. Further inside the home, more .22 unfired casings were also found inside a kitchen cabinet. They were collected as evidence. Like, it didn't occur to y'all to take the bullets. Seriously? Like, you could literally watch, you wouldn't even have to watch like a lot of Dateline. Like, one would teach you to not do this. That was the only evidence that was collected in the inside the Wagner home. So we are on to the next day, which was Thursday, October the 6th. They moved to the outside of the house. This was investigator Brian White. The day before was Scheiderer. This is Brian White. Brian White said the search outside in the outbuildings and in the trailers and stuff that were left uncovered printouts that were in the trash of Facebook chats that happened between a man and George Wagner's ex-wife, Tabitha. Another printout was a conversation between Hannah Mae and Angela Wagner, even though he did not read what the messages said. There were more shell casings in the outbuildings. They recovered hundreds of shell casings, including .22 caliber long rifle, rimfire casings, similar to the ones found at 2 of the 4 different crime scenes. They also testified that they went to the burn pit, which is the same one that Scheider was talking about previously. In that burn pit, they collected and recovered a burned electronic device. He didn't know what the device was or where it came from before it was burned in the pit. Investigators also found a well or cistern in an old barn on the property. It was covered in debris. Bricks had been placed to try to fill it in. And he said that they tried to uncover it, but they had to stop and were not able to check it for evidence because they didn't have the proper equipment to safely send someone down into the cistern to look. He said it wasn't particularly large, but it was deep and that they would need a dive team. There was Matthew White, a BCI ballistics expert, on the stand next. Go to the next part. We'll go over what he said. Week 4 summary, part 8. This is the second time that Matthew White has testified. He is a BCI ballistics and firearms lab technician. He testified that 40 caliber casings were likely fired from a Glock pistol. 22 caliber casings recovered were likely fired from a Walther Colt 1911 pistol, and the 30 caliber rounds found were likely fired from an SKS rifle. So prosecutor Andrew Wilson then showed Matthew White the list of the guns that was found in the notes section of Jake's phone, because again, how fucking stupid do you have to be? But he asked if any of the guns on that list could have fired the rounds that killed them. 2 of the guns on the list would have been able to fire those kinds of ammunition. He said an SKS 7.62 by 39 or X39 and a Colt 1911 22 pistol. The prosecution did ask whose names those appeared under, but defense attorneys objected and the question was withdrawn. But guess who owns the Colt 1911? Jake Wagner. And guess who owns that SKS rifle? George Wagner. Because these people were stupid enough to show the list in court, so naturally everybody got pictures of it. So that's why they withdrew the question, because they knew that they had already seen these things. Again, I am lazy, but right here, George's SKS. Here's the list of Jake's guns. There is the Colt 1911 22 pistol. Wilson did give lots of bags of evidence, more than 80 shell casings collected from the Wagner yard. It was objected for the presentation of that many casings because a lot of them didn't match the calibers used in the murders. The objection was overruled, so suck on that, John Parker. You're annoying as shit, and fuck you and Richard Nash for being an asshole to Tabby. Also, my friend saw Richard Nash at the Scioto River this weekend, and I hope he got the worst fucking steak they had. Fuck that dude. I mean, you might as well have asked Tabby what she was fucking wearing to deserve getting fucking hit with a 2x4. He did testify that the impressions of the cartridges and the firearm was unique. There were some unusual details, and he said the microscopic comparison of the shell casings collected from the Peterson Road property and the casings found in 2 of the homes where Frankie, Hannah Hazel, Dana, Chris Jr., and Hannah Mae were murdered, and ultimately formed the opinion that the shell casings were all fired from the same weapon. And this was the 22 caliber. So that would be the Colt, I believe. All right, head on over to part 9, and we'll get into the week 4 summary, part 9. So on Friday, the prosecution began by calling BCI agent Todd Fortner to the stand. We have seen him before. He was the one who was the lead investigator and processed the Frankie and Hannah Hazel scene. So on May 12th of 2017, investigators executed a different search warrant on a different property in Peebles, Ohio. It belonged to an automotive company. Parked there were several trucks and trailers that Fortner said it took officials over 7 hours to unpack and search. These were the ones that the Wagners packed up and left when they went to Alaska. He said ultimately they divided the trucks and trailers up into 5 scenes to divide and conquer, and ultimately several items were collected for evidence. In scene 1, a large trailer, agents discovered and collected a ghillie suit used by hunters or occasionally military members for camouflage. Inside the door of that trailer, they also found a jacketed bullet, a laptop, a tote containing several different trail cameras, a box containing cartridge casings and other gun-related items, an Xbox console, and a portfolio with George Wagner's name written on it from that trailer. In scene 2, a black pickup truck registered to George that was attached to a trailer. Agents collected 2 cell phones, a Nikon Coolpix camera, that is a throwback, and a box of documents inside the truck's cab. Also inside the trucks, officials gathered an envelope addressed to George and 2 Cabela's Club credit cards with George's name on them. A gun receipt signed by George was found in the truck's rear passenger seat. It was for the purchase of a Beretta 92 FS bought on April 27, 2016, 5 days after the murders. On the floorboard of the truck, they also collected a ski mask. Inside scene 3 was the black trailer attached to the truck labeled scene 2. So this is the trailer connected to George's truck. Inside of a tote inside there, they found another ski mask. Scene 4 was a gray pickup truck that was registered to Jake. It was locked, so they had a sheriff's deputy open it with a Slim Jim. Inside that truck, on the rear floorboard behind the driver's seat, agents found a third ski mask. Also inside that truck, investigators found legal papers and documents from a law office with Jake's name on it, and a receipt from a Walmart in West Union, Ohio, for the purchase of a camera kit with a 3-year service plan and a mobile phone. Scene 5 was a large open-top trailer with a tarp covering it that took agents several hours to search. Inside, they found a tote full of various electronic things like GPS and cameras. They sent those off to be analyzed. There was a Glock 17 gun case and other ammunition. They also found a brass catcher and some other things. So head over to part 10. We'll continue through what they found and finish this up. I misspoke. This is week 4, part 11. We are continuing with the items that they found at the search warrant of the automotive company property. They did clarify on the usage of a brass catcher. It could be used for people who reuse casings. It also could be used for people who don't want to leave behind rifle casings at a crime scene. Investigators also collected a lockpick set, grips for a Glock pistol, and a magazine loader, a drum magazine, a wooden stock for a gun. They found a bug detector, which is designed to detect audio bugging devices, cameras, and GPS trackers. On cross, John Parker asked if the items were DNA tested. He said no. Pointed out that the trailers were not hidden from view in any way. Fortner agreed and said they were all parked on the corner of the property, visible from 32, which is a public highway, or 32 or 41. After the lunch break, they called Julia, our phone expert, back. She said on scene. She was on scene that day. She was on scene that day, assigned to digging through paper documents found in the trailers and identifying anything that could be of note to the case. Now, she found a notebook in George's pickup truck with the name Edward Wagner on it, which is Jake, handwritten on the cover. Our boy is an artist. Inside, he first was titled Secret Spy Case in handwriting above a sketch of a case containing 2 Colt handguns, a toolkit, a cleaning kit, 2 flashlights, and 2 suppressors. The second, titled Close Combat Gear, showed a stick figure person covered in weapons and tactical gear like cell phones, 2 Colt pistols, 2 clips apiece on the leg holsters, and a 12 gauge on the person's back with 2 cantanas, which is a misspelling of katana. In the pages following, there were floor plans with measurements of a building and a top-down drawing of what would be a property. She also identified a notebook in which household costs were laid out month by month for 2016. Notably, costs for passports for adults and children were identified throughout the year. I don't really know what that means, and I don't remember them talking about that. On the page listed as expenses for March of 2017, There was a handwritten note that said, "Get ready to leave 3/18/17." There were some other documents as well. Go over to part 12, and I think we can wrap this up. Week 4, part 12. They also recovered several other documents, financial records, custody documents, and letters from Tabitha, which is George's ex-wife. Okay, so in a tote recovered from George's truck, Julia found what looked like custody documents. One page, a declaration of custody for a child in the event of a parent's death, appeared to have been signed by Hannah Mae, designating Jake as the custodian for Sophie in the event of her death. Hannah's signature was dated December 2014, but on the bottom corner of the printout, the document showed it had been printed off on April 3rd, 2016, just before the murders, and it was notarized by Rita Newcomb, which is Angela's mother. 2 other documents named Angela as the sole custodian of Sophia and George's son Bullvine if either brother died. Notably, Angela would have custody, not the children's mothers, in the event of their death. Rita Newcomb, who is Angela's mother, was arrested the same day as the Wagners and was charged with forgery of these documents. She took a plea deal, but prosecution dropped the forgery and perjury charges against her after the state said that its own handwriting expert had analyzed Newcomb's signature on the custody documents and determined it was not actually her signature. So I assume Angela was using her mother's stamp and signed her own name. Allegedly, I don't know. So in a container inside scene 4, which was Jake's gray pickup truck, investigators found copies of Tabitha's driver's license and social security cards. In a tote labeled important files was full of photocopies of private Facebook messages between Tabitha and several different people and between Tabitha's mother and several people. Keep in mind, Hannah Mae Roden talked to both Tabitha and Tabitha's mother. This important papers tote is also where they found the Walmart receipt showing the purchase of 2 pairs of men's athletic shoes. She immediately left the scene where the search warrant was being executed to head back to the investigation's headquarters, knowing she had paper copies of things that she needed to get from Walmart. She did get those things from Walmart, and she said in those images was Angela leaving the Waverly Walmart with a cart full of purchased items, including gas medicine. Be careful what you buy with your murder shoes, because then we're all going to see that somebody had an upset tummy. In other shots, the family vehicle could be seen pulling away, and this was on April 7th of 2016. Also in the tub was an order from Pike County Job and Family Services for the genetic paternity testing for Hannah Mae's daughter, Kylie. That was filed 2 months after the homicide. Obviously, he was not the father. They also had a calendar where they wrote a lot of stuff down, including injuries that Sophia had sustained. All right, truly the last part. Week 4, part 13. We're wrapping it up in this one way or another. Like I said, there were 2 calendars from 2015. There were notes about trucking hauls and when Sophia would be at the Wagner house. And some of the other notations were more specific. And they highlighted injuries that Sophia had sustained or when Jake picked up Sophia out of schedule at Hannah's request. Also found were handwritten notes from Hannah Mae to Jake declaring, "I love YEWW. I love you, babe." Also found more insurance documents, a business card for a tattoo shop, flyer for a mud race, other paperwork. Seems like a whole bunch of junk mail that probably should have thrown away. They called back John Jenkins. He testified more about the shoes, that he found the shoes there, the SKU numbers, and it matched a pair of gray men's athletic shoes, size 10.5 and 11. On cross, Parker asked whether Jenkins had gone specifically to the Waverly Walmart. Jenkins said he had not. That is all. Court adjourned for the day after he stepped down. If I remember right, they adjourned early that day too, and they also adjourned early like on Thursday or Wednesday. I'm sorry, I think it was Wednesday. So we are not in court today because today is either Columbus Day or Indigenous Peoples Day, depending on which holiday you want to celebrate. Although why anybody's celebrating Christopher Columbus is beyond me. But, I mean, we called the man a racist and take down all of his statues, but by God, we still want that day off of work. So, here we are. So far, tell me what you think. during this week, we kind of got our first piece that like directly puts George in the mix. Between his SKS rifle being used and the text message to his father telling him, "Don't come down here, we got company." Like, you cannot tell me he didn't know what was going on. And fine, we'll entertain the idea that he wasn't involved for a couple of seconds here. Fine, he wasn't involved. He didn't help shoot. The man knew what was happening. And even if he didn't know what was happening, he knew what happened by that point. So within a year, for argument's sake, he didn't have anything to do with it. Within a year, he knew. He knew. He knew about the lies with the custody. He knew about the murders, the drugs, everything. You cannot tell me that he wouldn't rat his family out and potentially die and get the death penalty for sticking his neck out for his family. You cannot convince me of this. You just can't. See you next week.